Hey guys, welcome back. Got a response for you this week. This one, you see it there in the title. David Sedaris is on Bill Maher talking about kids and teens these days. What are we to do with them? Specifically, they speak to the woke issue. How kids are becoming too woke and they think it's because of a lack of discipline, which may be true, but not in how they say it. Well, what's so great about this conversation is I think it does touch on an important issue, how we relate with our children, which they acknowledge. But as important as this issue, because how we relate with our children, it's at least more direct reflection of how we relate with ourselves. That's why it's important. That's the reason that feeds its importance. But, yeah, I think these guys are going to reveal how they relate with themselves. And in this conversation, as important as this conversation is, that's the extent to which they miss it. They completely miss the point. There's an error that's committed in here, explicitly said by Bill Maher, implicitly said by David Sedaris, that makes they will never be able to solve this problem because of this splinter in their mind, as we say. And this isn't to criticize Bill Maher, David Sedaris. I actually think, I know it's always lame when people say this about celebrities, but no, I think I could probably be friends with Bill Maher. We don't agree on everything. Not that I agree with any one person on everything, not even with myself. But I just get the sense that we'd be friends. I know people don't like him because he makes this, he does these douchey faces and make this smug point. Like, yeah, that's what I do. Okay, anyway. So this isn't to criticize Bill Maher, David Sedaris. They make a mistake that a lot of us make. Because we lack clarity in this issue. Let's see what they say.
Another thing I think we have in common is we hate kids.
Well, here's what I've been...
All right, we're getting distracted already, but this will be quick. But yeah, that's not that's not a hot take. Maybe that was a hot take in 1962, which I think indicates kind of the boomer nature of this conversation. Yeah, we're gonna complain about boomers, which is always a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun to blame boomers. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it's fun. But yeah, that's not. I mean, take it from somebody who didn't really like kids, and then had his own kid, a daughter, about to have a son any minute now. Yeah, I didn't like kids either, but what happens is you have your own kids, and then you start to like kids. You start to see the point, and now you start to like other kids, not because you like them any better, but now you understand the importance of a child community. So you're nice to other kids, because they're in proxy to your kids. That's not it just shows how out of touch this conversation is, because that's not a cool point. Again, it was cool 70 years ago. Maybe not so much now. It's just kind of dried up.
Thinking lately is that I feel like a lot of people who say that they're wounded or offended by something they were never hit by their parents. So I think no, it's true. Like, I know people who have never.
Okay, this isn't the point that I'm going to make. This is not the punchline of this debate. Spoiler, it's not much of a punchline. I mean, it's not, you know what I'm saying. It's not funny. But there's some indications of where this conversation is going, and this is one of these indications, right? There's a dichotomy already here between physical pain and emotional pain. Like, somehow physical is something different from emotional. Like, emotions, in a sense, don't exist, right? They're not extant in reality, which I guess technically they're not, but that doesn't mean we can't ostend them. It's maybe an indication these two don't know what emotions are. Let's continue.
Forever hit their children, and so they don't know what pain is, really. But I think that if you don't want to hit your kids, then that's fine. Of course, that's fine. But other people should be allowed to. Because I feel that...
Yeah, there's got to be some sociological By the way, I love this face that Bill Maher makes here. I'm just noticing it. I mean, I obviously accidentally started this, or stopped it, excuse me, on his face paint like this. But yeah, if you're just listening to this, you gotta go to the video, because I think David Sedaris just had a good punchline that Bill Maher is actually gonna steal later. He's gonna steal later. And right now he's thinking, ah, damn, he just had a good one. Maybe I can use that later on. That's what he's thinking there with those shifty eyes. But anyways, as I was saying, is there needs to be some sociological groupthink kind of study on what causes certain reactions on Bill Maher's show, specifically Bill Maher's show. The difference between a clap versus a fake laugh versus a genuine laugh versus a whoop and a holler like you heard there. I feel like I know whether there's going to be a whoop or a holler just by what they say. We need to make it more definitive than that. There's going to be a whoop or a holler or lack thereof later in this video. We will get to it. That is also quite telling of just how, it's telling of just how important this topic is that they're discussing, and we're just discussing by proxy.
I think that children are like animals that don't have any natural predators left, and they're just not afraid of anything. You know?
Well, they're different.
Yeah, and what's wrong with that? I mean, some fear is good. You want to fear a negative value, but the problem is when that fear generalizes. That's why it's called generalized anxiety disorder, and it generalizes to a positive value. Just again, more indication that these guys are going to totally fumble the ball in this conversation.
Different than they used to be. They're naturally feral. They are.
That's true. It gets a little bit of a tepid reaction because you're not supposed to say that, but of course that's true. Kids are feral, and they need to be guided by society. They need to be guided in order to fit in with society, and how they fit in is not dependent on the fitting in, but how healthy that society is. Yeah. I feel like I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, okay, so what Bill Maher is going to imply here, I think, is the discipline needs to come from on high, like the Platonic demiurge coming down and stamping form into the base matter that is the chaos. Maybe form is important, but where does the form come from? He implies there that it needs to come from on high. And that's the mistake he's going to make. And the reason why he's making this point is because he was a boomer and he grew up at least treating himself in a very different way. And maybe he saw the negative consequences to that. All right. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Continue.
I mean, it's true. We all read Lord of the Flies, right? I mean, well, what did we get out of that book? Kids are feral. They're right? Okay. They have to be civilized by adults, and adults stop doing that. I think that's the root of almost all of our problems.
Well, I was in London.
There, he says it's the root of almost all of our problems. Explicitly. Yeah. And you fumble this problem to the extent that it is important.
I was in London not long ago, and there were these boys breaking the branches off a tree. And this woman said, "You boys, stop doing that." And they said, "You can't talk to us." And they were right. You know what I mean? What she was doing was bullying, according to the law. So, and they knew it. They knew that.
But that's a sea change from when we were kids.
It's sad to me.
I
don't know if you heard that, but he said that's a seat change, like a role reversal from when we were kids. Now the kids are in charge. It's Lord of the Flies in real life.
Not only could your parent hit you, the neighbor could hit you.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It was like...
See how he's milking David Sedaris' joke? Yeah. Now, I'm not just making it up with that shifty eye thing. He's like, "Ooh, I'm going to steal that for later." Basically said the same thing that David Sedaris says. Not getting as much of a laugh. But he's saying your parents could hit you. Okay. Side point.
Like, it takes a village. That was the mentality. Like, any adult could... What? Well, maybe that's going a little too far. But I don't know. I think that's better than what we have now. I don't.
Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said? Let's go back a few seconds and watch that.
Maybe that's going a little too far, but I don't know. I think that's better than what we have now. I don't have children. You don't have children.
Oh, what did he say there about far? Something? Far? One more time.
Maybe that's going a little too far, but I don't know. I think that's better than what we have now. I don't have children.
Yeah, here we go. Maybe that's going a little bit too far, but it's better than what we have now. What's going on here? Bill Maher thinks this exists on a spectrum. He thinks that there's two sides of the spectrum. There's, let's just call it the corporal punishment and on one side, and the progressive. Not that corporate punishment necessarily means the same thing as being strict, but let's just make those two the same for the sake of this argument. We have corporal punishment and then the progressive parenting. We beat emotions into submission, or we just let kids express whatever emotions they want, which invariably leads to whatever boundaries they want. Right? It's not opposite sides. That's his mistake. It's two sides of the same coin. Neither side understands emotions. One reacts, the progressives react by letting the kid do whatever they want. Because who's to say that their emotion is wrong and your emotion's right? And then the more corporal punishment side, they're more explicit in that they don't understand emotions. They say, well, emotions don't exist. It's not real pain. We got to give you real pain by hitting you, right? Emotions don't exist. And so we're just going to beat them out of you. You don't understand emotions. You react in two seemingly different ways, but in fact is based on the same false dichotomy. Between, we'll call it emotional expression and civilization, or between individualism and civilization. Yeah, you know why a civilization collapses is because the individual gets repressed for the sake of civilization to enough of extent that's when the eruption with an I happens. That's when the wars happen, the revolutions happen. The revolution that is ultimately a revelation. That's why civilization collapses ultimately. So yeah, just can't deal with emotions. It's not about being strict with your kids or being permissive with your kids. Now, whether you choose to be strict in a way that part of the punishment for your rules is a beating, I would generally advise against that. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I know they're talking about it here. They're kind of joking, but the point is serious. Okay, look, I'll tell you, I don't endorse hitting your kids, but if you do really want to hit your kids, if it's just something you feel like you need to do, then at least plan it out. At least tell them, look, if you cross the street without looking both ways, I'm going to smack you on your butt. Right? So if it's planned out and you say, this is the punishment I give you, if you do A, then I'll do B. And it's planned out. But, that's the healthiest way to do it, and I also get the sense that most parents don't do it that way. It's more, yeah, exactly what I'm talking about. I don't understand your emotions. I don't understand what you're doing, child. And this reminds me of how I don't understand my own emotions. So I need to dispose of the situation by beating it, out of existence. And it works, right? It does work in the short term, or it definitely can work in the short term, but, right, you're, maybe be a Pyrrhic victory, I guess. So, there's no happy medium, right? Like drugs or alcohol. It's all in why you do it. Well, am I an alcoholic? I drink this much beer. I don't know. How much do you do it? The guy who drinks 15 beers a night versus the guy who drinks 0 beers. They're the same guy. Right? I can't trust my emotions. So just if one drop of alcohol hits my tongue, I'm going to lose control. And I'm uncomfortable with my emotions. I don't understand them. So I need to drink them out of existence. But it's the same thing. Right? It's the same thing. I had another point there. Oh yeah, so how do you do this? Well, let's see what else they have to say here. Because I think there's another point.
You don't have children, and some people say to me, you know, like, how do you know? I'm sentient. I mean, I even if I didn't go out in the world, every television show, every movie presents this dynamic between kids and parents. Every movie I see where the kids, they're told something, they just ignore it, or they yell back at their parents. They can't all be misrepresenting it. This must be what it's like. So.
Oh, okay, so this is actually a pretty good point. It sounds like he's making the, Tipper Gore, music causes violence. We can't listen to Marilyn Manson. That's what it was in the 90s. Like, culture negatively influences parents, but he's actually making the opposite point, which is true. So yeah, I think I'd be friends with this guy. And he's saying that, what's he saying? Oh, he's saying that art imitates life. It's because it's this way in culture, that's how it's represented in art. Which I think that's a more valid point. All right.
What about kids?
I've been.
You have a boyfriend, but you don't want to have kids.
No. But when I go on tour, I always do book signings, so I get to meet a lot of people, and you meet people in a way you can ask.
Yeah, here we go. We're getting to the point that I teased at the beginning. This is gonna be a good one, guys.
Ask questions in a way you wouldn't ask someone in the grocery store or whatever. You can ask whatever you want. But I'm always surprised. I meet a teenager and I say, what job? You have to have an after-school job. And the parent always, this is Atticus's time to be Atticus. Like they don't, and the kids don't.
Yeah, so you see what he's saying is kids don't get jobs these days. I wonder why kids don't get jobs these days. Maybe it's something to do with the exact mistake you're making. Maybe it has something to do with the exact issue that you fumbled in this conversation. All right.
So that's why you go to McDonald's, you go to these places now, and there's nobody working there. It's because people don't sending their kids out to work anymore.
Right.
And I mean, we had to. Like, I know this.
Yeah, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful conversation to the extent that, as I was saying before, how terrible, how absolutely horrible it is. Oh, what a train wreck. All right, this is great, though.
This makes you sound old, but like when I was 14, my mother.
Yeah, he just said it makes me sound old. Yeah, it makes you sound old. It in many ways.
There's like.
It's like just so old and outdated, you have no idea what's going on in our culture. Just unbelievable. Here we go.
Wanted us out of the house, and so we had to get volunteer jobs. So I went straight to the state psychiatric hospital, and I was there.
Wait, what's going on? You were an adolescent, and your mom wanted you to get, first of all, volunteer jobs, and then they I mean, that's difficult enough to do. It's actually try to volunteer. Not easy. I wonder why that is. Okay. So not only do you get to volunteer when you're a teenager somewhere, but you get to volunteer at a state psychiatric hospital? Could you imagine? Could you imagine doing that? Maybe you guys don't appreciate because you didn't go through the rigors and all the regulation that is part of graduate school. It's difficult enough for a grad student to volunteer at these places. I mean, I've heard, I haven't. This isn't the first time I've heard it when there used to be psychiatric hospitals. That's another indication of this problem. Going to the deinstitutionalization, which I'm guessing he was born in the 50s, right? So probably by the mid to late 60s, he was working volunteering in a state psychiatric hospital. Yeah, the deinstitutionalization had already started at that point, but it hadn't really gotten out of control by the late 70s, more into the 80s. But I've heard that, yeah, teenagers, anybody could go in and volunteer. You can't do that. There are way too many regulations around this stuff now. Way too many regulations. Yeah, you regulate things. Yeah, you regulate things. You make everything more entrenched, make it more difficult to change. That's really what happens when you regulate, especially, well, not all the time, but from what I know from the healthcare system, from the mental healthcare system is, yeah, you can regulate and you can make it safer, I guess, short term. It's very debatable whether it's safer, but one thing that you definitely do is you inhibit the ability to do things like this. You inhibit hustle. Well, no, nothing can really inhibit hustle, but you change the expression of the hustle. Are you going to hustle towards merit or hustle for political reasons? That changes. Anyway, this is good.
I worked there for 2 years. Great training. Great training. And it wasn't like, oh, you're going to help these people make paper flowers. It was, no, they need this orderly called in sick. And I'm 14 years old strapping a naked woman to a gurney, right? That's an education.
Right.
That's an education for a 14-year-old.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a great education for a 14-year-old to strap a naked woman to the gurney. Like, see what life is. I think that's great. But if that happened now, there would be so many lawsuits, or it would never even get to the point of happening because everybody's afraid of a lawsuit, just to put the topic simply. It would never get to that point. We couldn't do it. I think it's just another a reflection of how important this point is, because that's just another symptom of there are these issues that we don't know how to handle. So we need to create, this system and this regimentation around it. Oh yeah, but that actually wasn't my point. That was all distraction. I'm looking at my notes over here on the right. Okay, so he makes one more accidental point, and he doesn't get the best response to it, and I think that is very telling. Let's see what it is.
And then I was a dishwasher. But like if my parents said you need to concentrate on school, I wouldn't have spent my dishwashing time studying. They knew that. So I don't know. I just think it's really important for teenagers to work. Well, I think it's important for them to serve me. Well, is actually what I think.
Did you see that? He said, I actually think it's important for them to serve me. Let's go back and look at that.
I don't know. I just think it's really important for teenagers to work. Well, I think it's important for them to serve me. Is actually what I think.
Hear that? So he didn't get a very good laugh. There was a tepid, wait, what did he just say kind of laugh? Because when you say, I think it's important for teenagers to serve me, I don't think that David Sedaris is coming out implicitly as a pedophile here. I don't think that's some kind of unconscious slip. I'm not saying that, but there is a little bit of a sexual connotation to that joke. I want teenagers to serve me. Doesn't mean it in the sexual sense, but I do think people's hesitancy to laugh at that is an indication of, like, even if it is for them to serve you at a fast food, that's kind of gross. I mean, essentially what you're saying is that's a form of narcissism, true narcissism. I can't manage my emotions on my own, so other people in society need to be a certain way for them to placate my emotions. But I can't deal with teenagers. I can't put a healthy boundary down with teenagers. I mean, David Sedaris is, he's a big dork, so I'm sure teenagers intimidated him. I'm sure that's part of it. I can't deal with teenagers, so I need society to put them away. It's not pedophilia, of course, but it's kind of as gross as pedophilia. I have that great example. I love using this. I know you guys have probably heard this before, but that one guy I was working with in graduate school, a client of mine, somebody I was working with, and he had a lot of Oedipal issues with his mom. And one day he went into a support group for people who have, enmeshment issues with their mom. And he's sitting there and he's like, oh, this is great. I'm relating to all these people in here. But then he finds out that it's a support group for incest survivors. But he related them, even though he didn't experience physical incest, he definitely experienced emotional incest with his mom. And it didn't matter that it didn't physically happen to him. The emotions are the same. Right, and I think that's why a joke like that doesn't really work, because it's like, ooh, are you maybe even talking about like real pedophilia? I know you're not, but ooh, right? An indication of the gravity of this issue. And so, how do you deal with emotions? Look, it's not about. I was going to go through examples. This is going long enough. It's not about boundaries or no boundaries. It's about boundaries in a healthy way. Boundaries from the place of connection, of emotional validation, right? So, okay, I'm going to use examples with me and my daughter because I'm the perfect dad and I do everything correct all the time. I'm just, focusing on the times that I don't totally mess things up. But here's an example from my daughter where, this has happened last night. She didn't want to brush her teeth. Very resistant to doing it. Normally she likes to do it. So what do I do there? Do I just say, oh, well, she doesn't feel like she wants to brush her teeth, so now we're not going to do that? No, oral hygiene is important. But what do I do to get her to brush her teeth? Do I beat her or psychologically beat her or emotionally beat her by yelling at her or talking about how she's wrong? No. It's not one or the other, right? It's take the best of both and combine them to make your own. You understand her emotion. You understand from her point of view how brushing your teeth makes no sense. I mean, I'm surprised we get her to brush her teeth normally, because from her perspective, it must make absolutely no sense. So you understand where she comes from emotionally. You understand why there would be resistance there on some days, especially when she happens to be tired. So you don't deny, you don't say that she's wrong. You're like, yeah, I understand from your perspective, it's still important to brush your teeth. Now you can do that in a bunch of different ways. You have to tickle them into submission, which maybe, but right, like you're not upset with her. You take her emotion, she gives you her emotion, and you play with it while keeping the boundary. You don't just shut it down. So however you play with emotions with your children, it's basically how you play with them. So you make brushing your teeth playtime, for example. Right? That's just one instance of this. It's not, or it's not one or the other. But I think the reason why these two guys see it as one or the other is because of the mind-body dichotomy, which I already talked about. We have to go into that more. I had another example here, but whatever. It was basically that. That's all the time we have. We do free consultations. So subscribe. Put a comment down below if you guys have a question about this, because I do think this is really important. We do free consultations. animusempire.com/schedule. This thing about emotional management that we've been talking about, there's a particular way to do this, and that's why I say everybody gets it wrong, is because we're not going to manage emotions well, truly well, unless we really understand them. You can't just think, oh, emotions are these vague things that we need to accept. That's true, but we need to understand the purpose of emotions and how they work, and because they work in a certain way, we talk through them in a certain way. I mean, that's another great behavior that you can mirror with your kids. You talk through that a certain way. That's the kind of therapy that we do here. So yeah, free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. Thank you guys, and have fun out there.